Hey, it's Kim and welcome back to Pokemon Breaks. Today we have another addition to the Starting Your Collection series, and I'm going to be answering one of the most common questions I get in my messages. How do I figure out if the card or collection of cards I've come into contact with is worth money? I feel like most of the time this comes from people who have stumbled upon their childhood collection in a parent's attic or garage, or perhaps people that are going to garage sales or local game shops and wanting to pick up some cards but just not sure what they're looking at. Hopefully this video is helpful for you in identifying what cards might be worth money, as well as helping you to understand some of the terminology that collectors often use without thinking when they're talking about their cards. If this kind of video is helpful for you, please leave it a like and subscribe if you'd like to see more from me. I post a new video every single week, and we'll be trying to invest a little bit more into this Starting Our Collection series moving forward because I think it's content that people will find really helpful. Now I'm going to be using some of my favorite Pikachu cards to talk about this information. Pikachu is one of my favorite Pokemon characters. I'm actually wearing a Pikachu jumper from Uncle Rico today. If you like Pokemon clothes, please check out their website. I will leave their website and my code in the links down below so you can get a discount if you find anything that you like. The first thing you're going to want to do when you're trying to figure out if the card you have is worth something is have a look at the rarity symbol. Every Pokemon card will have a rarity symbol on it. It's usually the bottom left or right hand corner. Common cards are indicated by a little circle. Uncommon cards are indicated by a little diamond. Typically, common and uncommon cards are not worth very much. There are some exceptions, particularly vintage cards and those manufactured in the early 90s, as well as cards manufactured by Wizards of the Coast, or WotC, which will be identified potentially by a WotC stamp, or they can also be identified as cards printed between 1999 and 2000. Rare cards have a few different varieties, and we'll get into that a little bit later, but they are the most likely of these cards to be worth a little bit more. The other thing that you want to have a really quick look at when you're identifying what card you have is the set symbol. Everything after base set will have a set symbol on it, and that's usually right next to the rarity symbol and the card number. The set symbol is a small symbol, and you can usually look these up in keys online to figure out what set your card is from. The other great identifying information on the front of the card is going to be the card number. The card numbers are always shown as a fraction, so the number on top is the card's place in the set. So for instance, this Pikachu is number 58, and the denominator of that fraction is the set number. So how many cards are in that set? This Pikachu is 58 of 102. You'll notice on this card there is no set symbol, and that's because this Pikachu is from base set. When you're sussing out your cards, one of the more obvious features is going to be whether or not they are holographic. A holo card is one that has a shiny foil pattern in the artwork of the card itself, and a reverse holo card is one that's shiny all around the artwork, but the artwork itself is not holographic. Holographic cards and reverse holos can be worth something, especially older cards. So looking at cards in the 90s, if you have some holos, those are ones to check out for value. Other cards, particularly newer sets, may have some really special features. So some might be a level X, some might be full art cards. There's also hyper rares, gold cards, and more. Also, more recently, another category of rarity that the Pokemon TCG has introduced is the gallery cards. Many of our newer sets have a gallery, which again exists outside of the standard set. There's a trainer gallery, a Galarian gallery. These cards can be expensive or not expensive, but you'll identify them because there are some letters in front of the numbers. So you might see TG, for instance, to indicate trainer gallery, and you'll know these are some special gallery cards that exist outside of that standard set. Cards that are full art mean the artwork covers the entire card, tend to be worth a little bit more than standard common or uncommon cards. The other thing to look at with particularly full art cards is to see if they are what's called a secret rare. When you look at the set number for the card, most of the time the card fits within the set. So for instance, this particular Pikachu from Celebrations is number 5 of 25. When you compare it to a secret rare Pikachu, this card is number 160 of 159. So it exists outside of the standard set. It's kind of like a secret bonus. With the rares that are identified by a star symbol, there are a few different kinds. There are your standard rares that will have a black star. These are the most common of the rare cards. There are also more special rares that might be seen with a silver star, and these are typically secret rares that exist outside of the standard set. You may also find some rares that are stamped as a promo or a promotional card. Usually these cards only came with certain products, so you would have to buy a particular box or tin to be able to access the card. Some of these cards can be worth a lot of money, particularly if they were very difficult to access products, but many of them are not worth as much. Particularly with newer sets, a lot of the tin and collection boxes had very large print runs, so the promo cards are pretty common. The other thing it's really important that you're aware of when you're trying to value some of your Pokemon collectibles is just the quality and potential damage that's happened to your cards. Many collectors only want to collect pristine cards, and there are a few different terms that you should be aware of when you're looking out for that. A mint card should essentially mean that it has no damage or noticeable faults. This is a card that you would hope, if you sent it off to a grading company, would get at least a 9 or 10. A near mint card might be pack fresh, but potentially have a little bit of damage. Sometimes these might be cards that have edges or borders that were an issue when they were printed, or they might have some really minor flaws or issues, but hopefully again they would be an 8 or 9 out of 10 on quality. I will say, when you're looking on eBay, a lot of cards are labeled as near mint or mint PSA 10 when they're not graded. I'd really look out for that because it doesn't really mean anything. If you're buying cards online, it's really important that you look up close at the photos, and I would be really suspicious if sellers have, for instance, only one photo but they're selling multiple copies of a card, if it's an expensive card that you're wanting a really good copy of, because the likelihood is that they've taken photos of the best one and they may not send you that one. Anything labeled as mint or near mint should really not have any noticeable imperfections. The foil should be pretty shiny and not scratched. With older cards, that's actually really hard to find. Many of the original cards have been played, and I think that's great. But you'll notice that a lot of the cards you find on eBay do have some visible scratches. Realistically, they shouldn't be labeled as mint or near mint, but a lot of the time sellers will label them as such to bump them up in search terms. A lightly played card might be labeled as LP, and often cards will have some visible damage. They might have scratches or nicks or edge wear, and this generally means it's been sitting in a deck, it's been used, so if you send it off to a grading company, it's not going to get a really good grade. Moderately played cards will also have some really noticeable damage, which will be more extreme than something that has been lightly played. Might be deeper dents, more noticeable scratches, more obvious edge wear, etc. Moving on, a heavily played card is going to be quite damaged. It's usually something that's been played a lot without a sleeve, or might have even been sort of in the bottom of a bag or had rubber bands wrapped around it, that kind of thing. A damaged card is usually one that is damaged so badly it's unplayable in tournaments. It might be torn, it might be illegible, it might be water damaged. I probably wouldn't suggest trying to buy or sell damaged cards because you're not going to get much out of it. One other handy little hint when you're looking at valuing some of your cards is just to be mindful that the Shadowless Border does mean those cards are a bit less common and a bit more expensive. Base set doesn't have a set symbol on it, and if there is a shadow around the artwork, you'll know that it's a standard base set card. If there is no shadow around the artwork, it's a shadowless reprint, and those cards are going to be a little bit less common and a little bit harder to come by. Now, with all of this information, what you've hopefully identified is what Pokemon is on your card. You've identified what set it sits within using the set symbol and the collector number. You've picked out if it's a common, uncommon, or rare card, or if perhaps it's a promo card. And you can also tell if it's a full art card. This is all really important information for the next stage. Once you've figured out what card it is that you have in your possession, you want to get onto a search engine. You could use Google or you could use a sales website like eBay. Look up the card using the terms that you've identified. So you know what Pokemon it is, and you also know the set and the set number. Have a look on Google and see if you can identify that card, and then look for sales on eBay. So for instance, if we want to look up our base set Pikachu, we would search for base set Pikachu 58/102. We can see what pops up on Google and eBay, and then we're going to do a little bit more digging on eBay and see what we can find. The first search that you do on eBay will locate what sellers are listing these items for. Just because someone wants to sell something for that much doesn't necessarily mean it's worth that much. I have a suggestion that you modify your search terms a little bit. Limit your search to sold items so that you can compare, and have a look in your country for the last 3 months or so. This will give you a really good idea of what that particular card is selling for locally to you. That is going to give you a much better idea of what you can expect to sell it for than perhaps just looking at what it's listed for on the website. It's really important that when you're doing this search, you are comparing like for like. Make sure that you're not comparing the card that you have in its raw condition to a graded card, for instance. Graded cards, for the most part, will sell for more than raw cards. That's because they are, first of all, authenticated by the grading service, so the buyer knows what they're getting is the real deal. There's a cost involved in having cards graded, so they typically sell for more for that reason. And they're also protected, and the buyer is guaranteed the quality that's labeled on the slab. Just like we spoke about with that mint or near mint labeling, as a seller, you could perhaps feel that your card is mint or near mint, but when it reaches the buyer, they might disagree. With a graded card, you're not getting any of that kind of discrepancy. Also, make sure that when you're comparing, you're having a look at the actual card that you're selling. So we need to be very specific with our search terms to make sure that you're on the right track. Another really good tool that you can use to figure out if the particular card that you have is worth something is price charting using tcgplayer.com. A lot of collectors like to use this website to identify what cards they have that might be worth something. You can look up your particular card and see how much it's buying and selling for in that marketplace. And again, expect to see that if you try to sell it, you're hopefully going to get somewhere in the middle range of what that listing is going for currently. I'd really encourage you to take all of these things with a grain of salt. First of all, the marketplace in Pokemon is constantly fluctuating. There have been cards that have dropped or increased by $400 in the space of a day. Just because you have something that you want to sell and you think it's worth that price doesn't necessarily mean someone's going to be willing to pay that price. You need to find the right buyer. My biggest tips in terms of trying to value a collection would be, first of all, have a look through all of the cards and pull out the holographic and reverse holographic cards. Also pick out any rare cards identified with the star. And if you have any cards printed in the WotC era, so 1999 to 2000, or especially if they have a WotC stamp, put those aside. Also, any cards that are shadowless, as we spoke about for base set, or if anything has a first edition stamp on it. Those are all things to set aside and look at a little bit more in depth with the valuing. That's when you want to have a look at the set number, the rarity, Google it or look it up on eBay or TCG Player and see where the value is sitting. Be mindful of the quality and potential damage on your cards when you're making comparisons. If you have something that you think might be worth a fair bit of money and you want to sell it, I'd really encourage you to get some second opinions. There are a lot of snipers on eBay and a lot of people out there that really know what they're looking for, and I'd hate to see you get ripped off. Getting a second opinion from a friend who's a collector or someone in a local game shop could definitely help you out and is going to be worth the time invested. If you guys have any other tips or tricks, or there's stuff that I left out, I'm sure that there is, please leave it down in the comments below. If you are a newer collector or you're just getting back into collecting and you have any questions or things that you'd like to know about, I'd also love to know, so please leave them down below. I'm going to be making some more of these starting your collection videos soon, and I want to make sure that the content is really helpful for you. If you enjoyed this video, please leave it a like and subscribe if you'd like to see more from me. It helps out a lot more than you realize. I make a new video every single week. You can see the links to some of mine popping up now. Look after yourself until next time. I will see you soon. Bye.